I've been teaching on how we might seek wholeness. If we are whole, we get to live with a clean conscience as a gift from God. But we come to realize we need to let go of things that hurt us and others before God can give us that wholeness that we really want. The sermons that followed our foundation of I can, God can, I'll let Him explored our need to believe that God is in control and that He uses that control in a loving way on our behalf. And most recently, we have considered how we can gain peace by making amends. There is a lot to be said for this business of turning to God to find a clean conscience. Back in Psalm 51, the one that is attributed to David after he has been convicted by Nathan for all the trouble that he went through with murdering Uriah and marrying Bathsheba. Psalm 51 verse 10 says something that we might have grown up with in our liturgy. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners will return to thee. Deliver me from blood guiltness, O God, thou God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud of thy deliverance. Well, that deliver me from blood guiltness, O God, is just an ancient way of saying that we'd like to make amends. We'd like to find a peace. Our motivation for making amends is to become free of the unkind and hurtful things we've done in the past. We can't wish these guilty memories away. They don't go away. That's the whole problem. I believe that we live in bondage to these hurtful and unkind acts. They become things that make us feel bad about ourselves. And when they come to mind, we try to do something that will make feeling them go away. For some of us, what we want is found in a refrigerator. And of course, everybody's ready to blame the beer. But I always like to remember that there's ice cream in that refrigerator. And I think you can tell that I'm experienced in what can be found in a refrigerator. There is, but things that we can eat aren't the only things on the list. We can work ourselves to death to feel better. Just really grinding out hour after hour so that if anybody says, hey, you schnook, you can go, I'm not a schnook. I work 80 hours a week. I work harder than you. I work harder than you. I work harder than anybody I know. Therefore, I am not a schnook. So we can resort to behaviors, not just substances, to push away the guilty conscience that might be badgering us. And the important thing is to recognize that whatever we do, if we feel bad enough, often enough, then the things we use to feel better are things we start to use all the time. And that's the heart of an addiction. Constantly repeating anything to cover over how we feel makes an addiction. Now, some people have come to believe that you gotta have a substance to have an addiction, and that the substance is the thing that we're addicted to. And while I don't really want to debate whether you can be addicted to a substance, I really want to keep on the table the idea that the addiction is to something that makes the things that tear our guts out fade away. The real addiction is to feeling not in pain. emotionally, spiritually in pain. So I got all the junk in my life. It creates a constant source of pain. I turn to something that makes the pain go away. I'm addicted, it looks like, to this thing that I turn to. But the real addiction is to not being in pain, to not feeling that pain. That's a really good thing to debate sometime. You want to talk to me about it. We've talked about how apologies are inadequate. An apology doesn't mean we won't do it again. Talk is cheap. If we say we won't do it again and make no effort to begin any real change in our lives, so what? If we need to make amends for ignoring our families, apologizing and being home more is a good idea. If we need to make amends for hurtful things we said or did when we had a few too many, apologizing and quit drinking is a good idea. There are at least two key ideas to remember in making amends. First off, it has nothing to do whatsoever with letting people get even with us. I hurt you, I let you hurt me back, is not making amends. That's called revenge. Revenge sets a negative act against a negative act. We make amends by recognizing when we have hurt somebody, apologizing, and backing that apology with real change. Amends follows our negative act with a positive act. What we do to begin real change might not even be something the person we hurt can benefit from. If I hurt someone when I was drunk, I might make amends by going in for treatment. That doesn't directly benefit the person I hurt, but it proves that my intention to change is sincere. The first key in making amends is to see that it is not an excuse for revenge. The second key to bear in mind is that making amends isn't a way to draw even with the hurt we have caused others. If we can, we benefit by giving back more than we took, but how often can we actually do that? If we've made a hash of our lives, probably we don't have tons of resources to double down and pay back more than whatever was taken in the first place, financially, emotionally, any old category you name. Zacchaeus made an attempt to pay back extra because he was on the receiving end of being a schnook. And so when he decided to make amends, he said he would pay back fourfold all whom he had defrauded. But most of us can't repay what we've taken or done. We can't repay a dead person. We can't repay the hurt that was physical or emotional. Our goal is to repay every bit of what we owe, and we fail. Then we get to hate ourselves for failing in that too. And that's no way towards wholeness. The goal is not to repay, but to back an apology with a real change, and to do what is honestly within our reach to compensate whatever we've hurt. Zacchaeus could not repay the man who died hungry because he taxed him into poverty. But after he gave away half his wealth, nobody doubted Zacchaeus' sincerity. We can't repay, but we can apologize and do things that verify our sincerity to those we've hurt. Sometimes making amends will have serious consequences. Making amends could potentially cost us a job or might even bring a threat of imprisonment. We need to get good guidance when confronting these consequences. Don't just settle for a friend if things are looking big time. But just because a threat exists to us doesn't mean that we can say, oh, well, I guess I can't go there with amends. Because as long as there's no amends, there is no wholeness. As long as there is no wholeness, there is the pain of being torn apart. As long as there is the pain, there is a desire find the stuff, to do the things that cause the pain to be less. So, we need to see it through, even if there is some bumps in the road. If there are bumps in the road, find somebody who's been down the road before you and get their advice. And finally, on the subject of amends, we need to confront the possibility that I come to someone with amends, an apology, something to make it right, something honest, something substantial. And the person whom I hurt would rather see me in hell than let me off the hook and tell me as much. One of the hard things about amends is to realize that if we perform our amends just because somebody else wants to keep us in hell doesn't mean that we have to stay there. We can recognize that our amends have been set against whatever the hurt was, and we can go on with life, free of that blood guiltness that David spoke of in the Psalms. Which leaves us to come to kind of another plateau. You know, there was this I can't, God can, I'll let him foundation. And there was this seeking out our history and reconciling ourselves to it by saying it out loud. And then there's deciding, okay, we're going to actually do something about it. But what do we do when we screw up and we end up sort of in a place that looks a lot like where we started from, or halfway through this process? Well, we got to remember, this isn't a way to be perfect. It's a way to be whole. It's a way to recover who we are so that we can make our decisions based on all of our lives, all of what we know, all of what we've experienced, the good, the bad. And really, there's nothing to be done when we feel like we've come full circle, except for to continue in the circle. Go back to the foundations. Where did you mess up? Where do you think you messed up? It's tempting to fall back into our own garbage, is maybe another way to put it. What do we do when we get into a spot and we want to get out that old manipulation and control again? Because the world's not safe and I want to make it safe, so, well, I know how to do that. I'll guilt you, I'll shame you, I'll put you to silence you with something I know about you, and bing, bang, bong. And all of a sudden I'm completely indulging in all the old behaviors that have wrecked my life and the lives of those around me. If we feel pressure to jump back into that garbage, just remain calm and do more of what you did to crawl out of the garbage in the first place. If the garbage is to believe that we can do it ourselves, and now we're exhausted, frustrated, angry, the old foundation of, well, I guess I can't, needs to come back to mind. If our garbage is to believe that this whole thing is hopeless, God can, is the thing to bring to mind. If the garbage is that we are always praying for God to make us better, and we call to mind that God doesn't make us do anything, doesn't make anybody do anything. And we need to focus on how we refuse to let God change our bad habits when we cling to those habits. Let Him go, and we can move on. If our garbage is to think that we're terrible people, and we prove this to ourselves by repeating all the bad things we've ever done, then we need to call to mind our whole lives, not just the bad things. And we need to move on with our amends for those bad things until those hurtful things are set behind us. It would be nice if once we followed this path to wholeness, we could be all done and all perfect. But the foundation reminds us, I can't be perfect. So we will never be done. Nevertheless, as we walk in these new paths, our lives do get better all the time. As the past is amended, we seek that impossible things from ourselves. And as we try to live honestly each day, our lives become that much better. I want to close with one last thought. I think all of us recognize that we spend some of our time trying to make sure that nobody finds out who we really are. If we were to change so that who we really are is someone we don't need to hide, then all of the energy that goes into projecting this other person can be ours again. We don't need to use any energy to keep up a false front if the front isn't false anymore. If we can look in the mirror and like who we see, or at least be at peace with who we see, and we don't have to put in front of everybody else that we are in fact somebody else. All of that energy comes back into us. We would never have to spend another day hiding because there's nothing to catch. All the energy spent hiding would be ours. And we could use that energy, having that whole life that we've been pursuing. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. And amen. Now Sunday is going to be our O&A Sunday. So we'll concentrate on that this coming Sunday. But next Wednesday, we will add a really wonderful layer of strength and how to go about pursuing this relationship with God. So that's next Wednesday. And then the following Sunday, we wrap it all up and put a cap on it in time for Easter. I love that hymn, and I'll stand by it. And in that hymn, we're told that Jesus did something that achieved this wholeness with our God. So why do I teach about amends if Jesus did it all already on the cross? And the simple answer is because we don't believe it. It's too easy, requires too little of us, and just saying, well, yeah, I hurt you, but Jesus has done it all for me. So, we're good. It doesn't satisfy the soul of the one who's hurt, certainly. But if we're honest with ourselves, it doesn't do it for us either. I'm not saying it doesn't do it for God. I think it does do it for God. God paid dearly that day, but we paid nothing. And it's just a human proclivity that unless we pay something sincere, honest, positive, and substantial enough that it's not something you just blow off. We don't believe it ourselves. And that's the need to do amends. In amends, we find a path whereby we can free ourselves of the guilt. Certainly Jesus has done as much with God. But until I do amends, there is something in me. So it's not that Jesus needs me to finish the job, but something in me needs me to do something significant as well. Guess I felt that needed to be thrown in.